Good afternoon from my side. I'm delighted to moderate this panel where we look at the role of national plans from the Next Generation EU package and the impact it has on the higher education system reforms. I'm delighted that we have three panelists, so I would also like to ask Karina maybe to switch on her video to see also if it works, and I will ask you then to unmute when you speak. Before I introduce our panelists, a couple of words on the funding package that is provided through the Next Generation EU program. It's the largest one, additional funding to the multi-annual financial framework at European level, up to 750 billion will be delivered in grants and loans to help member states in the recovery after the corona pandemic. The money is allocated in different packages, and member states have different amounts. The biggest packages go to Spain, Italy, France, and Germany. Italy is also one example that takes loans. Most of the national plans for the moment have grants. The measures are also linked to policy priorities, in particular to the green and digital transition. You also see that the plans must allocate 37% to climate targets and 20% to digital measures. At EUA, we have looked at more than 20 of those national plans over the summer, and we looked at what universities can actually benefit from these funding and also how they can contribute to the big transition and challenges and the solution of those challenges. So if you want more details, I really recommend you to look at that briefing that you will also find in the resources page, but also on our website. What we can see is that universities receive investments in all areas, so in the learning and teaching mission, in the research and innovation mission, but also for infrastructure investments, both in physical as well as in virtual. The way they receive the funding is quite diverse. They can be direct beneficiaries or indirect through the whole higher education sector. They can be beneficiaries together with other research and innovation actors, or transversally as a whole of the public sector, very often the case for infrastructure investment, or through knock-on effects. But the money is only one part of those reforms, of those plans. The reforms play a very important part, and this is what we're going to look at, particularly at this panel. In our analysis, we find roughly four broad areas of reforms. So it could cover regulatory, advisory, and funding bodies, like in Romania or Luxembourg. It could include regulatory framework reforms, like in Bulgaria. It could cover funding models. This is the case in Latvia or Croatia, or it could include consolidation or concentration measures like in Slovakia or Bulgaria. So these plans provide new opportunities, but also add another element to the complexity of the funding models, to the funding landscape. So this is something that we will particularly want to address in this session, is the question of implementation and alignment and synergies with national and other European instruments. Let me introduce now our three panelists that will explore their approaches to the national plans from the government perspective, from the sector perspective, and also from the institutional perspective. And our three panelists are I hope that Karina Angelieva will also join us. We'll be able to connect, but I introduce her nevertheless at the beginning. She's Deputy Minister of Innovation and Growth since last December 21. Before that, she has various responsibilities in the Ministry of Education. She's been in Brussels at the permanent representation, and she coordinated the preparation of the new programs as well as the national plans. And her scientific background is in European integration and contemporary history. Our second panelist, which you can already see on the screen, Professor Josep Maria Garrell. He is the Rector of the University Ramon Llull in Barcelona in Spain. He's also Vice President of CRUE, the National Spanish Rectors Conference, and he's a EUA Board member. His scientific background is computer and electronic engineering. And I'm happy to see Karina also on the screen. So we have a complete panel. The last one to introduce, Professor Maurizio Tira, is the Rector of the University of Brescia in Italy. He is a member of the board of the Italian National Rectors Conference, and is also the international delegate for international affairs. And his scientific background is in environmental engineering, and he has been engaged in many national and European research projects, which also is obviously very helpful for these discussions. So I would like to invite our panelists now to first share with us three key elements of the university system reform that is included in their national plan. So, Karina, if I could start with you, and also, in addition to the three key elements, could you also explain where the inspiration came from for these reforms? Was the the Recovery and Resilience Facility, as it's called, an inspiration or a driving factor in this?
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks, EUA, for this invitation. I'm very happy to be in this wonderful panel and to share with all the stakeholders, but also other interested colleagues that today join our experience in Bulgaria. Recovery and Resilience Instrument gave us the possibility to think really smart and quick this time, because the instrument itself is an instrument that is providing a lot of investments, expects a huge reform, but anyhow, you should spend quickly. So, believe it or not, but we were able to persuade the Ministry of Finance that it's worth to invest in universities. And finally, to realize what we are talking from years concerning higher education, the links with research, and even more important, the links with innovation. Because we are talking from 20 years about the knowledge triangle and the role of universities for smart growth of the regions, but without investments and without equipping the universities to work and to understand how they can be impactful on the economy side, it wouldn't happen. So, yes, we receive support. And it's not an invention from yesterday to tomorrow. We use an experience what we already have worked totally on European level and the strategy for the European alliances, but also we use the policy support facility. Basically, this was reviewed in 2017-2018, which provide us with recommendation that we need quite bold reform, and we can't deliver what society expects with 40 universities. Therefore, we must invest in the so-called research universities. Of course, we need also universities for training, for skilling, so one can't shut down higher education institutes from today to tomorrow, because some of them has an extremely important social role for some of the regions. But still, we need to prioritize and to support universities to do research and innovation. Otherwise, they become something like a very professional vet hire schools. And like this, we just can't progress on the transformation side. Therefore, we use the recovery and resilience money to support 7 research universities. And we were inspired from different models we saw in Europe, such in Netherlands, in Sweden, but also in Switzerland, also outside Europe, such as Israel, to foster 5 key elements. First and more important, to support, to mirror basically the ERC grantees. So we will support these 7 research universities to choose a particular areas like missions where they would like to enhance reintegration of experienced researchers and to have a small ERC grants so that they can really raise the excellence impact. Secondly, and this is very important for the research universities, we'll support them with research programs. The idea is, and the money we are providing the universities is around 10% of the budget they will receive from 5 years from the government. So basically, we are really putting a lot of money in the first 2 years to make a kick in their research agenda. So they will have a very strong investment to develop their own research programs. And do you know, even more, to fund themselves competitive courses within the university. So we require from them to develop capacity to research management, because this is one of the problems nowadays, and the very low and weak participation of Bulgarian research organizations in Horizon Europe, for example. And then comes the new things I wanted to share with you. Obligatory component is for these universities to have their accelerator programs, incubators, so that research is not perceived anymore as only for PhDs and above, but we already involve students in accelerator programs. 4 pillars will be industry academia collaboration projects, so that we will invest money in contracted research projects. And last but not least, the 5th element will be internationalization and mobility exchange. Bulgarian government committed not only to spend this money, it's not about spending, as I said, I hope it's investment, because this is ensuring in the new strategy and the new law on higher education. And after the Recovery and Resilience Fund finish, basically we are committed to continue funding 10% of the public allocation for the universities to be for their research program. And on every 3 years, we will make an international peer review of the university, so that to increase the competition, maybe someone will drop, but someone will raise to the research university list. So like this, we would like to have inclusive approach, as I said. We would like to merge even higher education institutions, but not to shut down, because we need more education and we need facilities to skill and reskill. But nowadays, universities is also
Karina,
about research.
sorry, I need to interrupt a little bit, because we already, you already talked about some of the implementation aspects and follow-up, which we will then discuss a little bit later. I also would like to mention that we also have in the resources all 3 plans from Bulgaria, Spain, and Italy in the resources page, so you can have a look if you're interested in more details. So thank you very much. Josep Maria, in Spain, as I mentioned in the introduction, quite a big package on the national plans. Could you very briefly touch upon 3 key important elements from your perspective that these plans have for universities, and also very briefly where they were inspired from?
Thank you, Thomas. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me in this panel. I think I should start mentioning the very well-known briefing that the EUA published last October. In fact, our moderator is one of the authors, and he already mentioned it during the presentation. The document is focused on what the National Recovery and Resilience Plans hold for universities. In that briefing, there are at least a couple of evident observations. First, the level of information published, and by that I mean the details that contains the public documents. So the level of information is completely different from one country to another. And secondly, the opportunities for universities can be identified as part of a huge spectrum, ranging from clearly defined measures directly targeting specific higher education institutions of the country to measure that potentially can have a supportive effect on the whole sector of that country. I am completely sure that if you read the Spanish National Recovery and Resilience Plan, you will agree with me that, leaving aside some specific cases, the general rule is that you need to look for opportunities for universities. So what I am saying is that you will find general measures in which universities can participate, but not any specific one detailed. And it is a contextual thing that you need to know. The term education in Spain not necessarily always include higher education, or at least the learning and teaching activities of the universities. I mean that it's much better to find the term universities associated to education in order to clearly knowing if the plan is counting on universities for this topic or not. With all this in mind, I really don't know where the inspiration came from to launch a public consultation and did lots of bilateral dialogues with several stakeholders before starting the process of reforms. And just one, and let me stress that, just one of the stakeholders involved was CRUE and the Spanish National Rectors Conference. But what is important to know is that from CRUE, so from the representation of the majority of the Spanish universities, you have been trying to put in the political and social agenda the need for university reforms. And what really happened is that nothing moved until the eruption of the Next Generation program. In this sense, and beyond possible funding, the corona crisis has represented a motivation for starting the necessary reform process. And trying to answer the question about which are the three key elements, I think that I should say modernization, with no doubt, digitalization, also with no doubt, and lifelong learning linked to employability and competitiveness. I think I'm going to stop here, Thomas, because I am running out of time, but I can take questions on that during the Q&A at the end of the panel.
Thank you very much, Josep Maria, for this very clear pointing out what are the three key elements and also the involvement of the sector. This is also something which we have seen in the feedback that we got from our members. This is very diverse, as you mentioned. So if we hear also now maybe from you, Maurizio, the three key points you consider really important as reform elements in the Italian plan, and maybe also a brief reflection on where the inspiration came from. Has been the national plan and under the RRFP a driving force for this?
Well, thank you, Thomas, and thank you to the EUA for inviting me. And well, in Italy, it is quite clear in our national RRF that there is one mission out of 6 that is devoted to education, the entire educational system, where out of 30 billion euros, nearly half is devoted to university and research and applied research. And within this roughly 14 billion euros, 24% of the money is devoted to new personnel for universities, either researchers and technical staff and so on. Well, together with the money, we have some reform needed, and the process of reforming comes from a long ago, because we are really concerned about some constraints that especially public university are due to. And so the availability of money, the first big availability of money in the last decades, is forcing reforming. Some are ongoing, some have been already completed. One big reform is within the reform of public administration. I'm talking about the public university, of course. So, for example, we need to change some rules that make to the university some constraints when they are participated in international call for tenders where the rules are different. So, for example, new mechanisms to facilitate mobility of researchers, to facilitate the expenditure for big infrastructure, or even the discipline for the recruitment of our personnel. So this is one pillar of reform. Another one that is also in line with European strategy for university, so the possibility to create the European University Alliances, is the reform of degree classes, what we have called degree classes. So the frame within we have to build our proposal, educational proposals. We have quite a lot of constraints, either in the contents, timing, and so on, that do not fit with those of other countries. So we are in the process of reforming this. This reform is ongoing. And one that is being already approved is a reform for new intermediate, what we call professional degrees that are not very developed in Italy, only 20,000 students in the country. We want to increase very much this figure. That is 3 years professional degree after the secondary school, not giving the chance to enter also in the master degree, but giving a very professional based preparation in strict cooperation with the firms and industries. This is a reform that is already been approved from the Law Chamber of the Parliament. There is also one about the PhD program that has been already approved. We have a new degree for the PhD programs that is fostering new cooperation, international cooperation, the university cooperation, and national PhD programs. So these are the main reforms. The RRF was a big driver for pushing up the reforms we were waiting since years, because money has to go with the possibility of spending it in a wise way.
Thank you very much, Maurizio, for this reflections, and interesting also to hear that the RRF has been a big driver, obviously, for reforms that have been there for a while, or reform plans. We've seen this somewhere else as well. I would like to kick off a second round, and Karina already addressed it a little bit in her introductory statement, is the question how to accompany the measures that are out there, either in the investment or the reform programs, to make them basically more sustainable. So also for Bulgaria, Karina, you mentioned the money that is available there to accompany the reforms. So maybe you could again address a little bit there. What is it that you have to ensure that these big reforms that you have outlined there are sort of not breaking off after the investment, which is for a brief period there, how to make it longer and sustainable?
Thank you, Thomas. Do you know what I was thinking? We are constantly requesting something from the higher education institutions and researchers. Some people around me are saying you always protect the researchers. Yes, of course. I protect everyone. But I really see a particular role of people working in the universities. And we are putting a lot of stress last year. So we want skilling and reskilling. The industry every day is crying for skillful people, talents, of course. Every day someone is nagging on us that we are not internationalized. There is not enough collaboration in Europe. Okay, so basically this is the answer. We requested the other institutions, because each sector needs investments now. Each sector needs reforms, from agriculture to social affairs. Can you say that no, someone doesn't need that? That's impossible. We persuade the other sectors. From health, as I tell, to transport, Ministry of Finance, trust. We need to invest in universities to build capacity on their own to understand and enshrine the excellence principles, but also the principle of impact. because this is completely new and the academic community didn't work in this way the last year. Secondly, giving them trust will give a kind of a gesture, a signal to the young generation of people. You can also study here, or, which is much more important for Bulgaria, I don't know how of the people here are aware of the brain drain of Bulgaria the last 10 years. We wanted to give a signal to researchers, to you, to your students. We are open also. We want to internationalize and to give platform for other people to come here to work in the research sector. This is very important. In this to happen, I'm sorry, but non-government or parliament, whatever, ministry can do it on its own. We need to inbuild in the universities themselves a capacity so that to take forward this. And of course, it needs a long-term commitment. But if once the universities understand this and can perform and can persuade the business that also the business can trust them to build together these talents, this pool of highly qualified people, then it's coming very easily to persuade every government and each government for money, because the evidence also is coming from the business, not only nagging from one side of the academic community. So the idea of all this is to build a kind of a trust, a new dialogue, let's put it in this way, between society, universities and government, so that we are not locking the political mandate of one government for 4 years, but this is a long-term, 10 years prospect. This is very important. Recovery and resilience instrument is short-term injection, fostering reform and investments, but also it's giving a commitment for the long-term understanding of each changing whoever government or political party. This will be very nice to be understood, not only in one member state, but in all member states.
I think that's a very important message. Thank you, Karina, for the long-term investment and the long-term stability of whatever you plan and have kickstarted with this plan. Josep Maria, can I ask you for Spain, what are the accompanying measures that you see, or maybe the absence, depending on your opinion, to make this a more long-term sustainable development, and also how is this then translated into institutional practices? As you already mentioned, CRUE has made quite some proposals and positions. So how do you ensure that in the implementation this is taken up?
Well, let me start saying that as far as I know, CRUE was not involved in the elaboration of the first version of the Spanish Recovery and Resilience Plan, but what we did was to work with the initial proposal in order to clearly identify how universities can contribute to the objectives of that plan. I mean, not only identify the possible opportunities for universities, but to identify, and that's important, how universities can help executing the plan. I think that the second is better than the first. And we made a proposal that was elaborated considering a previous document in which we outlined the reasons why the Spanish university system needs reforms, and also we outlined which kind of reforms we need. I'm talking about a document that with the title University 2030, with a very similar approach to the University Without Walls document that the EUA published. The CRUE proposal was very ambitious. I think that we use a real approach, but also ambitious scope, because we think that universities can play a very important role in the recovery and resilience plans. It includes a motivation, it includes a mapping of university capabilities to the plan objectives, a proposal for programs, several proposals also about funding, and proposals about implementation. From the first version of the Recovery and Resilience Plan, and I suppose reading the contributions of CRUE, the Spanish government includes some of the ideas in the other versions of the plan. I think that public administration should ask universities to do more things, to better engage with society in general. I'm not saying that universities can do everything, but societies need more, let me say, university without walls in general. I invite you to read the excellent document of the EUA about this topic. I guess you agree with me that recovery usually implies the concept of short and mid-term, and resilience implies mid and long terms. Universities can help on the recovery phase, but we can be key players in the resilient phase of the plan. If we talk about measures to assure that reforms translate into institutional practices, I'm afraid that nothing concrete has been done yet. The Spanish government is working on a proposal for a new university system law. The proposal is based on the concept of university system, so it means all the recognized universities that exist in Spain. So the concept of universities is applied from the very beginning. I think that it's worth to say, and it is normal, that the main reforms that are included in the proposal are targeted to public universities, the government, the funding, etc. I think that my answer should be, Thomas, wait and see. It is too early to say if the reforms will be directly translated into institutional practices. Today we are talking about the new European strategy for universities, and I think that this strategy defines a framework, a common European framework, and probably you will agree with me that the critical topic, the critical thing is about implementation. So it happens at the national level. Wait and see if the national recovery and resilience plans will implement or not the needed reforms, or the plans will invest or not the money where it is really needed for the recovery and for the resilience. And that's all, Thomas.
What about the pace? Because there's a huge challenge in terms of evaluation, I mean, both for Spain and for Bulgaria, because the first evaluations will already happen as of next year. So how do you expect to put forward, concrete milestones and results? Perhaps, Karina, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, it's a huge challenge. Till now, I was saying only the good part we experienced. Of course, it was not so easy. But what we would like to do is really innovative. We will open in spring a call to the research universities to apply with their strategic research and innovation agenda. And we will invite an international peer review panel to evaluate and to provide recommendations. So we would implement a so-called living process. We are not going to reject strategic research agendas from the universities, but to provide recommendations what they can ameliorate. But meantime, those pillars that I described, 5 pillars that are ready, they'll start to implement, because basically it's really challenging, but all the contracts and investment ideas and priorities and projects one would like to realize have to be contracted till the end of 2023. But as I said, yes, it's challenging, but this will create a kind of a new type of partnership between the government and the universities, and of course the Council of Rectors, because we need to extrapolate also this model to the other universities. So for 2 years, we will implement very quick model for a modus operandi. This is our idea. So international peer review and a lot of freedom to universities to decide on their own investments, but also a huge responsibility to report on the results.
I think we've already managed to share quite some elements. There have been some questions in the chat, or that I can't try to answer now all of them, but there has been a question if these plans are also available outside Europe. That I can simply answer no, and that is one question. So I would like maybe now to use the last 5 minutes that we have to give to the three of you, now that we're back on screen, a reflection of what would you give as a message for the future to, well, the respective counterpart that you would see. So that would be Karina to universities, and Maurizio and Josep Maria maybe to the government and also to European policymakers. What kind of messages would you give for the next period in order to make this work and make this as a success? I mean, the very high expectations. What would be your short key message to them? Maurizio, if you would like to start with that.
Well, first of all, I didn't have the chance to answer your last question that you didn't make, but it was written in the minutes. And but this is also a final message, I think. So the money in the recovery fund that we have in Italy is quite a great amount of money. As you said, we are one of the countries with a greater financement in the next generation EU, but the point is what will be the availability of resources in the long term. And for this, I think that politicians finance things that are perceived as important by the society. So money goes with reputation. So we have a very great reputation as Italian university, but not enough money so far. And so I think that we have to keep alive the importance of higher education, as the strategy of European Union perfectly states, not just for us, for university, not just for the young people that we are preparing, but also for the entire society and European culture. So this is the main point. So let's try to keep alive this financement in the long term. And secondly, we have discovered, since it is not easy to spend such an amount of money in a short time, that we need a greater preparation of the technical staff in universities. We have invested very much in professors, of course, in researchers, but sometimes, in my country at least, we have not enough evaluated the importance of the technical staff. And that is very relevant when we have to administrate such a big amount of money to create new legal entities and to create legal entities that will last also when the money of the recovery fund will be finished. So I think there should be a great investment in the personnel that is developing a career in managing research and not just becoming professor, but with a great skills in managing research. I know that in some countries this is more developed, not so much in my country, but it is definitely very, very important for us to keep alive and add the right value to this money that we are going to receive. So this is my message, if I may, for the final message.
Thank you very much, Maurizio and Josep Maria and Karina. You have 1 minute to share. So everyone, 30 seconds, a message.
Okay, two messages. First, take into consideration the concept of multi-level governance. I mean, the communication, the coordination between the different administrations. I mean, the European level administration, the national administration, and also the regional administration. So please take into consideration that we need to coordinate these at least 3 levels of governance. And the second one is, it's very short. It's let's implement the reforms together. So by that, I mean government and the sector.
Thank you very much, Josep Maria. Karina, your 30 seconds.
Thank you, gentlemen, because you make my life easier. Full commitment to Maurizio, Josep, for they said. Only one thing to add and to propose. I think that today platform organized on the European University Association is a great platform. And we need to consider to share more often the practices and the reforms we are implementing under the Recovery Resilience Plan, under strategies, and other instruments, in line with this bridge we want to create much better between the European higher education area and European research area. My message is look into different practices, share experience, and let's learn how to make better peer review and performance-based funding based on different criteria, also those that are linked to impact. This is a strong message because the career of young researchers need a new vision and a new kick from this multi-layer governmental approach and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina. Thank you to all the panelists and also to the audience for staying with us, even if we had some technical hiccups, but I think it's getting better. So I think for the next panel, everything should be fine, touching on wood here. And so I'm not going to do a summary of that, but I would like to guide you again if you're interested in the briefing that is available here. And I think the very brief summary of what everyone said at these key points, I think is really, it's a complex matter. It can have a great impact, but it requires that all actors work together. And if that's the case, then I'm also quite confident that we will manage to make this thing successful. And with this, we will certainly follow up from EUA side to monitoring also the implementation, and then I'm confident that we will also see this as a successful policy. So thank you very much to everyone, and I'm handing over now again to Amanda for the next session. Thank you very much.